Button, pulling up my notes. Excuse me. Well, it says sorry we're having trouble playing the video. So connecting. Oh, there we go. We are live.
There we go.
Now I'll pull my notes up. Corley Moore, Firehouse Vigilance. This is Weekly Scrap number 53 with special guest Dave LeBlanc. He has 35 years, and that's me doing guerrilla firefighter math from kind of reading different bios and stuff but 35 years of being involved in the fire service in some way, shape, or fashion. He is an author that wrote a lot of my favorite articles, especially when I promoted to a company officer. The View from the Front Seat on the Backstep Firefighter blog, and I love those. They had a profound impact on me as a young officer. Brother, it is my pleasure to have you as a guest on Weekly Scrap number 53. Welcome, Dave LeBlanc.
It's my pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invite, and anytime we get an opportunity to talk like this and just share views and everything else, it's great. So I'll get more out of this than you will, and probably more than everybody in the audience will. So, I'm glad to be here.
Very excited, man. I am very excited. Just from the email you sent me earlier, there is so much in there. And then the text messages we've exchanged, we prepared for this. I'm super excited. Greg Wyant has chimed in and said, "Evening, Chief," which is perfect for me telling everybody out there, if you have questions or comments for myself and especially for Chief Dave LeBlanc, please do not hesitate to put them in there. We would love to field those questions. So as we go through, if you think of stuff, throw them in the comments and I will definitely read them. So with all of that out of the way, did I forget anything in the intro or anything you want to add?
No, it's I was blessed at an early age to I grew up next door to a fireman and started going to fires really early with him. Whenever they responded in off duty, I'd grab a camera and go, and that started a passion of buffing. And so I was always watching and then just learned and overcame some health obstacles to eventually come out of dispatch and become a full-time firefighter, and never look back since. So for me, every day is gravy. In October of 2000, I went on the line from dispatch, and never thought I'd be sitting here as a chief officer, never thought I'd make company officer, never thought I'd be a firefighter. So there's a lot of perseverance in that story, and a lot of just dumbass luck, and it always takes a combination of both. But a lot of good people put me where I am today, and I'm forever indebted to those guys. So
that is all. I always, whenever I talk to somebody, especially someone who's been in the job for a long time, it always comes down to, and they always say the same, not the exact same things, but some combination of the luck and the mentors and the hard work, And
yeah.
so it's always, it's cool to see that formula that is easy to pass on and hopefully easy to emulate.
Right. And, and I think just real quick on that, I know, and talking to friends, not everybody has that luck or has that, it's the hubris thing, right? Did I get where I am because I'm good, which is hubris, or did I get where I am because I was lucky? We were lucky to be born where we were born, and, and all the rest of it. So I just right time, right place, certainly a lot of effort and hard work, but also will always be humbled by the fact that, a couple more points on a test or less, and I'm not sitting where I am, or didn't get the job, or, bad question in the interview, or somebody didn't have a benevolent heart. So, I mean, there's so many things that you can do everything right and still just not quite make the grade, or not have the coaching, the mentoring and everything else. So, always look back where you came from and remember those people, because they helped you get there, and then help the next guy up. That's what it's all about.
And I can tell you this, and I mentioned it in the intro, but helping the next guy up, your articles were a guidepost to someone you never met, and me when I promoted, just so you know. So it's not just the guys local.
So since you kind of, and I know we kind of said this is going to be loose, then you kind of open the door.
Sure.
So, I look at even that aspect, right? So the people that I've met, and social media is a double-edged sword. That I've been in enough fist fights on social media that I finally come to the conclusion you're never going to change anybody's mind, and as long as you can have a reasonable conversation. But the friends I've made, the people that I've connected with that I never would have connected with, I was able to teach in Indy because of guys that I met. I have a solid group of friends that we talk on a daily basis, and all the guys that I teach with out there. But this all started way back when I was friends with Bill Carey. We had before Facebook, and for some of you guys here, this may be foreign, but there were these forum websites, Firehouse Forum, and I was a member of a group of guys called the International Association of Crusty Old Jakes, but that was where I connected to Bill Carey. And we used to share thoughts back and forth, some FDNY guys on there, a ton of guys, a lot of information. And one day, Bill had his blog, The Backstep Firefighter. And one day I said, hey, I wrote this article, Bill, what do you think? And we lost one of my first captain. I lost him to cancer. Oh. And after we'd lost another guy to a brain tumor. And it just was a cancer article. And I sent it to Bill, and he's like, yeah, I'll run it. He threw it up there. And that was like one of the first things I wrote. And then he just gave me a place to have a voice. And, it caught on. And what I had to say resonated with a bunch of people. I mean, when I think about me having a voice, I'm like from little tinyville, New England. Like if you look in Massachusetts, I'm about as far east as you can go. I'm sitting at less than a mile from the water right now, and less than a mile from the water going toward the Atlantic Ocean, toward France. And real small town, right next to the town I grew up in. And, to think that I have any kind of national voice is just very humbling to me, because I never thought. So when I hear, that my articles made an impact, I'm touched that they did. And it's great to hear that. But there's that other surreal piece of me that says, who the hell am I to even, have this voice, let alone have people, have it resonate with people. So it's kind of a cool thing. I mean, it's the way this world works. And, I'm lucky to be sitting where I am.
Well, I'm glad you decided to join me and let me pick your brain, and so it's an honor for me. I'll catch you up here because we got comments coming at you. We got Justin Ide said, greetings, Chief. Fire by trade. Brian Brush, of course, said, my man. Scott Smith said, nah, because you love the job. Not sure what he was referencing there, but Dave, fire by trade. Brian Brush, sorry, I always say Dave, the deep thinker. Great voice of balance in the fire service for many years. And Jared Sergi chimed in and said, dang it, about to catch a flight. Love you, Chief. I'll watch it later. And hi, watching from Florida from Gigi Galasso. If I mispronounce any names, I'm sorry, guys. I'll do my best I can. I'll put it that way. That's my disclaimer.
It's Fireman East, man. It's okay. It's Fireman East.
There we are.
Pronounce it like it looks like.
All right, I'm going to start with we're already dipping into it, so this is already off to a great start. I'm going to start with a very broad question for you, and it's a theme that runs through a lot of your articles. In fact, it impacted me. Firehouse Vigilance itself, the motto is the never-ending fight against complacency. So basically, just talk about complacency and how you look at it in the fire service.
So a great question, right? So it's, and this is something, and I think something important that I share with everybody. Like I didn't start the job this way. So, I look back now and my view on complacency is a lot different than it was. I had my days in the recliner where, and I got burned. And I, like everybody, I got burned because I didn't check the truck right, or I didn't do something right. But it's difficult sometimes to maintain vigilance in a job when you're not doing the job. And it's one of the comments I sent to you earlier today was, when you're not going to fires, there's no relevance, right? So it's like, well, why do I got to do that? Because, we're not going to do that today. I'm going to spend the whole day in the ambulance, or, and then when you go into fires, you can be good, but you cut corners, or you take a shortcut and you keep doing those shortcuts, and you kind of become complacent that way. So complacency kind of cuts both ways, kind of an overuse or an underuse thing. Like so trying to maintain that vigilance in an atmosphere when you're not doing it on a daily basis for me was huge. And that's something that I really, I always worked on something every day, especially as I promoted up and after I kind of figured it out, to improve my skills. So even if we weren't doing a company drill or a group drill, I'd always do something just to keep my head in the game, just to think about it. I used to, before I even was a firefighter, when I was dispatching, I lived about 20 minutes from where I worked. And I would use the drive to work just to do scenarios through my head.
Nice.
Just to kind of, well, what happens if this happens? This happens.
Believe me, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So I would do that. And I think that's, I think that, and this is going to try not to sound like I'm egotistical here when I say it, but that's what separates the good guys from the mediocre guys, is the guys that really, and there are a lot better people than me that do it, but the guys that come into work and, their sole focus is on getting better and being better every day, because you never know when that moment's going to call on you. And I just shared a quote earlier while I was waiting to log on from Matt Best, which if you've read his book, Thank Me for My Service, it's off the chart. It's hysterical and not a lot of seriousness in it. But one of the things he talks about, and I'm just going to paraphrase, is
Let's write it down.
He focuses so much on his shooting because he said, my shooting wasn't just for my well-being; it was for my team's well-being. And if I, he says, and I almost looked at it as what was the word he used? Like negligence. If I didn't, if I wasn't the best shot I could be.
Nice.
So I shared that quote and said, kind of like firemen, pay attention. This is how we should be coming to work every day, because everything that we do, somebody else's life depends on it. If you're not up to throwing ladders, if you're not up to stretching the line or chasing kinks or doing all those things, those are all going to come back and bite you. And it's not just going to bite you; it's going to bite the whole evolution.
Team. Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of a cool quote, especially because it's about the only serious thing he talks about in the book. So I pulled that one out. But so yeah, that's it. It's, and I get it. It's hard, and you're going to have days when you come in and you don't do, you're not 100%, but you still got to do those basic things. We've been burned with trucks coming back from the mechanics and things weren't right. Guys didn't check to see the water was in tank. Guys didn't check that. We had one truck came back and they disconnected the throttle module and never plugged it back in.
Oof.
And never found it out, until a couple hours later. Nozzles not, we had hose testing done and nozzles not put back on, all those little things, because it's easy just to pencil whip the check sheet or make sure your Scott's, oh yeah, it's in the seat, it's fine.
Right.
And then you find those things out, it's from as simple as, I got burned one time, forgot my helmet. I left my helmet in the other truck, and we jumped back and forth from the ambulance to the engine. I grabbed my gear and left my helmet in the ambulance, pull up to a fire, and you got no helmet. That's kind of hard to overcome.
Very.
And that's just, that's complacency. That's just not paying attention to the big picture.
No, absolutely. And the stories you could probably swap. Everybody here, I left mine on the front bumper of a truck one day, and the chief luckily was following us, stopped and grabbed it and gave it to me at the fire we were responding to. And so he can grab everybody.
Yep. So.
And I like that word you use, which is negligence, or the word you quoted from Matt Best, which is if you're not doing the absolute best you can, then it is basically negligence. If you are not, and like you said, peaks and valleys, percentages, you got to find a way to stay motivated on those days when you are not on the top.
Yep. So, exactly.
I love that. And the biggest thing is if you can find like-minded people.
Right.
So.
Right. And that's it. And there's going to be some days when, depending on who you're working with and what's going on or whatever, you go alone. You can't get anybody else to buy in. And some days you go out and you start doing stuff, and because you're doing stuff, other guys get motivated and jump in as well. So it's, I think it's, you have to be comfortable stepping outside the box, pushing yourself, being uncomfortable.
Love it.
And you're going to, you're going to work with guys. We've all worked with them that aren't interested in putting one more inch of effort forward. And, all you can do is do the best you can do and focus on yourself.
Yeah, that might be the best advice.
I got accused one day by my captain. Well, one of my captains said to me, he goes, the problem is you're trying to hold them to your standard. You're trying to, hold people to your standard. And that was kind of took me a minute to understand that, as a firefighter at the time. And I'm like, so what's wrong with that? But I was in no position to hold them to my standard.
Right. So,
you can peer pressure them as much as you want, but you're not necessarily going to get the buy-in because you're not, you don't have rank. And, then as I promoted up, I was trying to find that balance between, not being, we're going to drill every minute of the day guy, but, we got to get some drilling done. We're going to have some fun and we're going to live in the firehouse too. So.
I like it. I like it a lot. Now I have a question on that. Because you have promoted up through the ranks, and now you've gone from probationary all the way to the guy with all the bugles. And so.
Stop it, Captain.
What's that?
Stop it, Captain.
That's the short answer. Stop it, Captain.
Yeah,
I can't argue with that.
I have an advanced degree in stapler management that I can fill you in on later. But no, it's I've enjoyed every position I'm at. But yeah, it's there's a lot. It just changes when you get older, and I'm further away from the trucks now, and I'm not. I enjoy what I do, but that's why I like teaching so much, because it gets me back into the trenches. But anyway, so your question.
Yeah, basically it was on the balance between setting that personal example and holding that standard, as you move up through the ranks. Have you found a good balance for that?
Yeah. So one of the things what I struggle with, right. So now it's trying to find that balance and set the personal example and trying not to micromanage in doing it. Right. So for me, like that's kind of a little bit of that sticky point is if I'm constantly on my company officers, my shift officers, even the firefighters about doing certain things because it's my feeling of my standard, the way it should be done, then, the evolution of that is now I'm micromanaging them. So for me, one of the big things I had to learn was, the policies and procedures are out there and everybody knows what's expected. I'm very big and have always been very big. And this goes back to talk about reading, like if any of Leo Stapleton's books, especially the ones that he wrote that were fiction. That's me. Sorry.
No, I saw, I got the 30 years on the line in the commish over there getting ready.
Yep. So those are the two ones that were nonfiction. But he wrote a whole series of books that were fiction. It starts at FFOP, firefighter on probation, and goes all the way up through and essentially follows the guy. Okay. But he talked a lot in those. There's a lot of great points you can get out of those. But it was probably the first time I'd ever read about setting expectations. And he talks about it's a new company officer. He goes in the firehouse and, as a lieutenant, and they go out on a call and nobody did anything that he wanted them to do. And he goes, this went on for like, 2 or 3 shifts. Finally, like the third shift, he kind of figured out, he's like, hey, if anybody's going to get screwed doing this job, it's going to be somebody else, not me. So he called everybody in and he said, hey, listen, this is the shit I want done when you come to work. I want you to make sure your gear's on the truck. Everything's ready to go. This is it. Bah, bah, bah. And the guys looked at him and said, yeah, we were just waiting for you to tell us what you wanted. Right. So if you don't set the expectations, how can you expect them to follow them? But then once you've set them, you kind of, it's kind of like letting the bird out of the nest. You got to let them go and not, be following them around the firehouse and making sure that everything is done. So there's a lot of times where, I will think about, I'll have the conversation in my head at home because I hear something that's not going the way I think it should or whatever, but then just take a deep breath and say, if it's a big enough deal, I'll find out about it. And if it's not, then I don't need to worry about it. And, but another book, here's a book for you.
A lot of butts.
You can put on your list.
I know. I like it.
Yeah. About Face by Colonel David Hackworth.
Hackworth. Okay.
Great book. But one of the things he's like, he talks about in the military growing up, and it's an Army book. And he joined the Army at 15 and retired during Vietnam. And, but he's like, the unit only does well what the company commander checks on. So, if you're not constantly keeping your finger on everything and making sure without micromanaging, but just making sure that everything's going right, then, how can you expect everybody to follow it? So it's kind of like, hey, this is what I expect. And this is me showing I care without trying to, lean too hard one way or the other. Yeah, exactly.
The balance, that magical balance that's damn near impossible.
And it changes, right? So, when I was a lieutenant, I was in charge of 3 people. When I was a captain, I was in charge of 7 or 8 people. Then I was deputy, I was in charge of 35 people. Now I'm in charge of everybody. But I'm not. I work with them. I look at it more as it's more of a partnership. I rely so much on my company officers because we're a small department. They carry the message out, and it's critical that I need to explain to them. So we're going to go into another book. It starts with Why, Simon Sinek.
There we go. Right.
But there's a whole piece of that, right? Like people need to know why. They need to understand the why of what we do. And sometimes that's, self-evident to you or to other people, but not to some people. So right. Taking the time, set the expectations, and then explain why this is what you want. Right. And sometimes it's just as simple as like, hey, listen, we got to do this or somebody's going to yell at me and I don't want to get yelled at. So
sure,
we're going to do this. So I don't get yelled at. So then you don't get yelled at. So but if people understand it and you have that opportunity, you may not change their mind on some things. They maybe, not agree with it. At the end of the day, the things we have to do, and orders are orders and we're going to follow those. But when you get into that gray area, if you can make people understand why you want to do something that way and get that buy-in, then that's a home run.
Awesome. From expectations to the start with why. I don't know a better way to say it than the why.
Yep.
Yes, and then accountability all springs from that, while avoiding the micromanagement.
Right.
The perfect balance. All right, I'm going to catch us up here. Let me see what I've missed. Hi, watching from Florida. Evening from the fire pit out back from Trenton Slattery. Garrett Tao said, evening, Chiefs. First time catching the scrap live. Welcome, Garrett. Drew Evans says, that mustache is dreamy. So
Drew's a good boy. Drew's one of the guys I teach with.
There you go.
Solid dude. He's they're all groups affectionately known as the D-Gen, so they'll all appreciate the shout out. But good group of guys to teach with. I met Drew 2 years ago when we taught out there, and just great guys. Those guys. So this is a story for you, and I got to share it now. Now we went sideways again.
Here we go. Rabbit hole time.
So we're in the height of COVID, right? Everything's all shut down, and my promotion ceremony was in July. So minding my own business Friday night, just finished mowing my lawn. I walk in the door. My wife's like, "Hey, take your sandwich. We got to shoot down to Eastham. It's about a 20-minute ride." She made up some excuse. I don't know why. We're getting in the car, do something for my mother. I don't remember what it was. So me, because I'm the most gullible human being, just like, okay, fine, get in the car, I'm eating a sandwich. I don't give a shit. Pull up to this house in Eastham, and there's this group of people sitting around a fire pit. So I'm like, what are we picking up? And she's like, I don't know, something your mother got for you, whatever. I'm like, well, it's kind of awkward. These people are having like a cookout, or they're sitting around their fire pit, and we're just like crashing their party. Get out of the car, and the first person that I saw was Drew Evans. So these guys, all the guys that I'm lucky enough to teach with out in Indy, that form this group that, like I said, we talk every day. All these guys and their wives secretly planned this whole trip and came up and were there for my swearing in, which was I can't put it into words.
Yeah,
I can't put it into words. Just great group of guys, and really what the fire service is all about. And I'm blessed to call every one of them a brother and a sister, and their wives are with them. And I can't convince my wife to go cross town, let alone to travel to another state for somebody, getting sworn in. So
right on.
Just an amazing thing. But that's what the brotherhood is too, and that's makes this job so great.
No, and it's moving too. And your wife was really good at it took a lot of subterfuge, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, she's one of, like, I'll wake up someday, there'll be no money in the bank account. She'll be the one that pulled it off, and I won't know the difference. So she's good. She puts up a lot of crap for me, and that's another piece of it too, is the whole family piece, and having that support is critical.
Awesome. All right, catching up, and then we'll move on. Todd Selkowski said, "Hi, Chief."
Yep, he is another good boy.
Jack Wilson, my man, Chief Dave LeBlanc. Marcio Teixeira said, hi from Portugal. Corpo de Bombeiros Cepedeiros de Faro. Stay safe. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly. And Todd Selkowski said, hi, Chief, first time on Facebook. Okay, so no questions yet, but a lot of greetings for you. So moving on.
Nice.
You sent me an email when we first started talking about coming on the scrap, and the list of topics you sent was amazing. So now what I'm going to do is basically draw from that email and just throw one-word topics at you. Some of them we've already even touched on. But throw one-word topics at you. We'll see what kind of discussion we can generate. Again, anybody in the comments who wants us to dig deeper or has a question they want clarified, throw it at us and we will field it. We'll see how many rabbit holes we can descend. So are you ready for the first word?
Yeah, fire it away, man.
Mindset.
So we talked about complacency. Mindset is to me, the opposite of complacency. That's how you avoid complacency. So blessed very early in my career, I did much like you're doing now. There was, without video, they did these internet radio show type things and blog talk radio kind of stuff. And very early on in my career doing that, and this was after I had been blogging for a while, I was fortunate to have Rick George on my show.
Yes. And
Rick introduced me to Grossman and the whole mindset and the stress inoculation thing, and that's changed so much now from what it was, and I can't even do it justice. It's one of the pieces of this job that fascinates me, but I haven't been able to put the time into it that I really should to be more educated on it. And Rick's gone down a whole great, and he's doing great things with guys and building firefighter resiliency up. But so kind of got us in the mindset thing. We talk about the AFA mentality and going to work and, going out the door and, expecting that you're going on a real call or preparing like you're going on a real call. So I wrote about it a bunch. And so I'm sure you're familiar with the quote, the Andy Fredericks quote, the garbage man doesn't get excited when he comes around the corner and sees a pile of garbage. So Bill Carey, who as Ed had talked about earlier, where I started writing and was hosting my stuff, this was as the internet started to take off, looking for hashtags, looking for the catchphrase, and he coined "expect fire," and it kind of came out of that Andy Fredericks quote.
Right on.
So right. Okay. So expect fire. Right. Garbage man's not excited because he expects to see garbage. We should expect to see fire. Wrote about it a bunch, and he kind of gave us that little tagline. And then fast forward a little bit further, there was a whole discussion about victim survivability profiling.
Right. Not
my favorite topic. Wrote a lot about it. I've had some conversations with the author on some of those type radio shows. They will people now will insist that it's not about us not going in, but one of the quotes I wrote a long time ago was, size up is about what you can and can't do. Survivability profiling is what you will and won't do. When you're telling me that based on the smoke conditions, everybody in the building be dead, so we should just kind of lay back and worry about putting the fire out and then go look for the victims. I'm not, and I know they've changed it. It's come around like everything. It's come around a little bit, but to me, it was the wrong mindset. It was the wrong mentality for us to have.
Oh yeah.
A little bit of run and joke. We around here, it's every department, every area has the little phrases that they use. Like we used to have one on medical calls. People say conscious butt breathing, so it kind of became butt breathing. But it was, it's kind of like, all right, well, if they're not breathing, then that's a different call. So the same thing is like, a local alarm with no smoke or no fire. Well, if there was smoke or fire, it would be a building fire. So, it's kind of one of those mindsets. And I hate it because it puts us in the mindset of getting in the truck, going out the door, thinking it's a bullshit run.
Right. Thinking it's butt breathing.
Yep, exactly. And so then you get there and you come around the corner and now there's fire coming out of 3 windows for a local or central station alarm because you said, it's just an AFA. And you can't catch up from that. And I did a lecture about mindset, and one of the things I talk about is the Squirrel Run fire, Coleraine Township. And no disrespect to anybody who was there, but I actually talked to a guy who was friends with somebody who was at the fire. It was on the line, the initial line where the 2 were killed, Boxerman and Shera. And the captain, when she got there, had to get dressed because she just had her pants on because she'd been working out or something like that. So the driver did the initial interview with the homeowner, and just kind of behind the ball, like, when you're trying to do something fast and then you think, now I'm behind the 8 ball, so then you try and do it faster. And the faster you try and go, the slower you get. To me, it's just that kind of mindset. So I just, I always, when I got on the truck, I got on the right front seat, I was always dressed, hood on, ready to go. And if I didn't need it, then it was easy to dress down. But if I did need it, the point, and this is really just a stupid thing. I used to I trained really hard to dress with my gloves on, hood, mask with my gloves on. Right. Because I put my gloves on as soon as I got in the truck, because if I didn't, I would forget to put them on inevitably and end up, hurting myself or, being somewhere where I should have had them on and didn't have them on. And if you take yourself out of the picture because your PPE isn't up to speed, if your hood wasn't on, if you now can't do what you need to do because you got to get dressed, going back to the Matt Best quote, you kind of set the whole team up for failure. Now somebody else has got to pick up your slack because you're not ready to go.
Right back to that negligence. No, and the dominoes falling. The dominoes, you can always...
Yeah, the dominoes, the Swiss cheese, right? Yeah. Lining up the holes,
And hindsight, and it's always tough on the looking backwards on it, but it always is. And so the more of those potential dominoes you can take out of the equation, the better off.
Right.
When they start falling. If they start, there isn't a chain because you've taken some of the pieces out, hopefully.
Right.
Yep, it's a good theory.
Yeah.
Emergencies get that vote.
Yeah, so that's kind of when you talk about mindset, that's kind of where I'm going for. You should go to work expecting to go to a fire, and then if you're at a fire, you should expect that there's victims. That was the expect victims was a retaliatory comment to the victim survivability profiling was, we should be expecting that the house is occupied, and I know, and you get into this, and some of these, and believe me, I live in small manpower departments, so I get we can't do everything at once.
Sure.
I don't have the luxury of showing up with a dedicated engine and truck, but we should be planning to search every building. Even if the homeowner meets us in the front lawn and says everybody's out, they're nervous, they're jammed, their house is on fire. They may not remember that little Timmy came home from his sleepover. They may not know. You know, you hear about the stories of the kid that's home from college and, you know, goes out for the night and the parents don't realize he came home and he's sleeping in the basement,
Yeah.
you know. So, you know, to me, it's empty when we say it's empty, when we go in and search it. And this isn't a cavalier attitude. This isn't, you know, risking ourselves unnecessarily, but there's risk involved in everything that we do. Our job is to manage that risk by training ourselves and preparing ourselves and then going in and doing the job that we're supposed to do. And that's putting the fire out and searching for victims.
Hey,
that's where those two things came from.
Amen. Expect fire, expect victims, and get ready like it's so.
So I'll give you a quote, and I sent it to you earlier, but I got to look it up, so I don't want to screw it up.
No problem.
I know you have it. But so I was blessed last year that I got to go out to Montana, and I did a hike in the Beartooth Ridge with a bunch of Navy SEALs, retired Navy SEALs. So it was a veterans program. It's called the Eddie Filani Tadpole Foundation, and I became friends with them, still texting them back and forth. One of the guys, Bobby Howell's a senior chief, and we were talking about this whole risk thing. This was actually happened on Facebook a couple of months ago.
Okay.
Bobby, who's all his brothers and his father were on the job in New York City, so he gets the family business. And he said to me, he goes, you know, our jobs are not to be safe, but to be effective, and to do that as safely as possible.
Nice.
So that's like printed out and hung on my wall in my office, because I could not agree more with that statement. That's 100% on point. That's what it is. You know, our safety doesn't come from avoiding risk. Our safety comes from preparing ourselves to do the job and then embracing that risk without, you know, not talking about cowboy stuff. We're not talking about, you know, taking unnecessary chances, but we need to take necessary chances. And at the end of the day, if we avoid risk, we're just transferring it to somebody else.
No, and no one's saying being suicidal. And it always seems like they try to pigeonhole you into that. Like, oh, you know. Yeah. It's not.
You're a cowboy. You're a cowboy.
That. Our job is not to be safe. It is to be effective.
Yep.
And what was the second part? Was to be as
so our job is not to be safe. It's to be effective and to do that as safely as possible.
And to do that as safely. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to use that and put it in a picture. And who do I quote it to? What was the name?
I'll send you. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send you. I actually made it up in like a little thing. It's got the Bud's symbol on the background because he's a Navy SEAL, and I'll send it. I'll send you the picture itself.
All right, I got a couple questions to throw at you here.
Sure.
All right, where we at? Jake Dodge said, Chief, what? This is a big one, so just here we go. Chief, what do you have on changing and building a training culture? Movers and shakers, mutts, leaders. That's it.
Holy crap! So Jake's a good boy. Jake's he's a natural boy. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's not culture change is not. So I'm blessed, right? I'm blessed. I work in a department that has had a good culture as long as I've been there and from before it. And we had to change into the guard, and, you know, some of the guys that were less interested in being firefighters have moved on, you know, through retirement and everything else. But, you know, sometimes you change a culture, one person, one company, one shift at a time. It's just, I'm not an expert on culture change. All I can say is if you come to work with your set of standards and you work to your set of standards and hopefully you get to a point where you can influence some others, and then you influence some others, and it's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of explanation. It's a lot of, you know, your why. It's a lot of those things. But if your culture is bad above you, it's really hard that you're going to bump up against that ceiling, and you're not going to fix that easily.
No, absolutely.
All right. So that was his culture. What was it? Something about,
I will get back
tell them no 27-part questions. This isn't back to school.
Yeah, we're firefighters here. You need A and B max. No, changing and building a training culture, basically, and basically the difference between movers and shakers, the mutts and the leaders. You know, and you've touched on some of it, but go ahead.
So you know, this is like, and this isn't meant to. So, you know, it's the 100 mile in a briefcase rule, right? I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase
know.
before. Mike Dowling was the one that said it to me the first time, and it's so on point. So I could go to your department and I could teach a class, and you could come to my department and you could teach a class, and it could be the exact same class. In your department, the guys wouldn't even give you the time of day. They'd barely pay attention to you because they don't, for whatever reason, because you're their guy.
Sure.
And in my department, they would think you were a prophet, and that's the 100 mile in the briefcase rule.
Okay.
That's what it takes to make an expert. This is what the whole state,
okay.
How do you become an expert? 100 miles in a briefcase. So, the problem, a lot of guys, and we saw it, like we had guys, they would take a class and then they come back from the class and they'd want to change the entire department based on that one class. And then 3 days later, they'd go back to being the slug that sat in the recliner that they had been up until they took that class, 2 weeks before.
Right.
So I think it's the same thing. You set your standard and you work to your standard, and you hope that by some synergy, you get some more people involved. There's more people involved. So I've been a big fan of Aaron Fields for a long time, and nozzle forward and everything else. And they had a class down here at the Barnstable County Academy, and like 8 people signed up from my job. They all went. This was when I was deputy. So I was like 2-day class, whatever, training money, don't care. Approved it all. I was like, all 8 of them are going, want them to go. I know it's a great class. I went up, sat in through, and hung around for most of the 2 days that they did. But out of that class, they came back and we changed our entire hose loads.
Nice.
We got a grant, put smoothbore nozzles in place,
nice.
changed our hose loads. And if anything, we stretched hose more, from that point on than we had ever stretched it in my previous years with the department. So, that was an opportunity, and I won't take any credit for it because those 8 individuals bought into it and wanted to make that change. So I facilitated it.
Well, you said yes. That's a big part. Is you did say yes.
And knew and I guess had the the vision to know that what they were going to was worthwhile to make these changes. Never thought it would end up where it did. But yeah, we changed all the hose loads around. Got the nozzle grant came in, and now we have a much more better. Oh boy. A much better water delivery package than we ever had.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Anyway, and go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to.
No, I was just gonna say, and it's purpose built. It's not just we're going to pull this nozzle and hope we get 150 gallons a minute out of it. It's purpose built. We know what we're flowing. Our gauges are marked, and everybody's dialed in. So that's awesome. Some good stuff.
And it's direct result of sending those 8 guys. And that's and when I say saying yes, it's John Spear and Tom Johnson, their book Mindset, which is funny because it's right on topic. They talk about the courage it takes for a leader to say yes, because saying no is easy. It's easy to say no. No, you guys don't need that. No.
I'd rather say yes than say no. I hate saying no.
I love that.
Don't tell anybody that, but no. It's and you got to keep it in. You got to keep it in the box. You got to make sure people stay in lane. But
sure.
We're that's the one thing that we're working on now is just building up training and getting more training because experience is changing. So that to me, that's the only way we're ever going to fix that. Is by more training.
Greg Wheeler said, "Hey, buddy." Scott Smith
Nice.
said, "We need to do what we said we would when we begged to get on this job. A few years in, we forget why we wanted to be here." Very good, very solid point. And that's that complacency, man. Complacency is insidious. It is powerful. It's there for. It's just waiting, calling your name every day. I promise.
If you could, and I said this the other day. We swore in a new guy, and I said to him, "I'm like, you need to remember the drive and determination it took you to get to this point." To get the job, remember that and bring it to work every single day when you come to work.
Nice.
So if you came to work trying as hard at work as you did to get the job in the first place, we'd all be rock stars. There wouldn't be a fire we couldn't fight. But I get it. It's human nature. I'm not, and I'm really not trying to be negative toward anybody with it. It's just, that's to me, that's that commitment that we need to come in and we all fall victim to it sometimes. It's just snapping yourself out of it.
Absolutely. The goal is to find that consistency where you're maximizing the peaks and minimizing the valleys, I think. So I mean, they're going to happen. There's no avoiding, but
Agreed.
life
100%.
And if you haven't hit them, then you just haven't lived long enough yet.
Right.
Garrett Toes said, I don't hope I got your name right. Garrett Toes. I don't know if this is a mindset question, but my LT never bunkers up before leaving the station. Our LTs are also the drivers. And he never gives a size up and establishes command when we roll into a scene, whether it's a fire alarm or a medical. How can I lead from below and convince him to take these basic actions on calls? There you go.
Hey, so I'm going to start with the classic. I'm going to quote Bill Carey here again. Is you do you. I mean, so that's I think the big problem of running the fire service. I think this is social media and our political climate that we're in to a T. Is that nobody has any tolerance for anybody else's views. So I appreciate what Garrett's saying. I'm not saying that I have the answers for it. If we've gone away from it now, but you used to have the option as a driver not to bunker up because guys complained that they couldn't drive as whatever. Now we've made the switch where we've indicated to people how important it is, even the driver, and we usually run it. Well, we could be running anywhere from a 2-man engine to a 4-man engine, depending on whether the ambulance is in or everything else. But even on that 4-man company, having the driver bunker up because he might be throwing a ladder. We might need to push him into service.
Sure.
Worst case worse, I've taken the pump. I've had to do things that I shouldn't have to do when I was in command because we just haven't had the bodies to get it done otherwise. So that being said, it's a conversation, Garrett, and you can try and explain to your lieutenant, or at least ask, try and get his reasoning. Again, goes back to why. Maybe he has a reason that he does what he does. And if you explain to him what your concerns are or what you're trying to understand, maybe he'll change his thinking a little bit. Maybe it won't, but until you have the conversation, you won't know, and you have to have the conversation. I mean, that's the one thing I've learned, and I've learned more and more every day. I wish I'd spent more time in this when I was younger in my career. Is the difficult conversations, any conversation, and people are such a big part of this job. This job is all about people.
Yes.
Whether it's the people we protect or the people we work with, it's all about people. But not just as coworkers. It's understanding what drives everybody and trying to, because we're all different. So trying to understand that and then maximize everybody's everybody's potential while still getting the job done.
And while keeping that balance and not micromanaging. So it's the juggling it all. That's a great question, man. And leading from the bottom, especially depending on how far on the bottom you are, you're pretty much left with your personal example. And like you said, the communication, you have to have the conversation. That's such a beautiful piece of advice for moving that forward. Because without it, you can't do it. Right. Jess Rodzinka said, you touched on it earlier. How can you go about changing the culture from the bottom? But then he came back and said, never mind, you touched on it. Thanks, brother. Looking good, by the way. And that was from Jess Rodzinka. Scott Smith, there is so much truth to that. 100 miles in a briefcase. Ryan Novak said, speaking of changing culture, what advice do you have for increasing morale? We've had horrible morale spread over our department like a plague over the last 15 years and continuously infects the mindset of new guys. These are some heavy hitter questions here coming at you, Dave.
I didn't know I was going to have to work tonight, man. So morale is a huge question, and it's not an easy. It's not if you just do this, then morale is fixed. So to Ryan's point, I will tell you that it starts for him. I know Ryan, so he's a captain in New Britain, Connecticut. It may just be your shift, Ryan, that you're going to affect. So I had a good friend who was a deputy chief not far from me and went to college with him. And they had a horrible morale problem in their department. And finally got to the point where his deputy pulled him aside one day and said, listen, you need to just focus on your shift. So he called it the island of group 4. And that was all they worried about. So when the guys, he'd walk into the kitchen table and the guys would be bitching about everything that was going wrong. Chief did this, A shift did this, blah, blah, blah. He'd just pick up the newspaper and go, so how'd those Red Sox do last night? And that was his cue to everybody at the table to stop trying to eat everybody alive. Let's just focus on what we're going to do. So he realized really early on the only thing that he could impact was his group. So he impacted them in a positive manner, set the tone in a positive manner. And then that kind of builds on itself. And you Ryan, as a as a captain, you may be able to affect more than one shift, and you can try and set the tone. But again, you're going to have to get your buy-in from your lieutenants from the other shifts, and just kind of keep building that up. So that's bad morale is not an easy thing to fix, and it takes a lot of, again, go back to communication, listening. It's something that I always want to know how everybody's doing. I want to know what's going on, because again, it goes back to the people, right? It's the people that make the place work.
And the thing I always want to, on morale, and I'm going to tack on to what you're saying here, if you don't mind, which is
absolutely
Chief Scott Thompson down at the Colony. He wrote his book, The Functional Fire Company, unbelievably good book on culture building. And his talk is all about you have to build the culture on purpose. Otherwise, you're left with what is accidental. And so it's such a great thing. But he talks about allowing people to drift towards failure. And I can't go into all of it real quick, but basically, usually with morale issues, there is something that has broken down in the past to where there's a group that no longer feels like they have any control. And so they start making up their own narrative for why things are the way they are. And it's so hard to rebuild that trust and get them back on board to quit ripping apart this from the inside out. And it's such a long process. So anyway.
It's cancer. I mean, it's a cancer. It's, and you don't understand, right? This is something you don't understand. So this is like great. I'm going to give you my mother advice now. This is my mother's advice.
Here we go. Okay, we're going full spectrum.
Yeah. So my dad was direct. I would almost go as far as saying blunt and to the point, right? He didn't mince words. You knew where you stood the second the words came out of his mouth.
Right on.
My mother is not like that. My mother will beat around the bush till the cows come home. So I'm a balance of the two of them. I'm probably more like my mother than my father, but I have the ability to be just like my father. And so whatever it is, I am who I am. I can't change either one. But my mom said to me one time, she said, a great way to convey to people something without making an attack is to say, when you say that or when you do that, it makes me feel like this. Because now I'm not saying, hey, you're an asshole. Right. I'm saying, hey, when you do that, it makes me feel like that. And that offers perspective, right? And that's, I'm putting you, by me saying that to you, Corley, I'm putting you in my eyes. I'm making you see the world through my vision. And that, at least if you're a normal human being, should give you pause enough to say, well, geez, I don't want to make you feel like shit. I was just trying to say that, we need to do this better. And maybe you can retool how you interact with people and everything else. And so that was like a great piece, and I use it all the time.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's mom, right? So mom made me successful in that one. I mean, at least it gives you, it creates a dialogue and lets other people know how how you're feeling.
You doing this made me feel like this, because it's better than saying you're being a dick.
I'm not saying you're a jerk.
Right.
Why am I a jerk? Well, because you did this. No, I'm saying, hey, when you do that, I feel like this. You make me feel like crap. Oh, okay, I won't do that anymore. Thanks.
Awesome. We got be the example. Your day will come. He was replying to Garrett. That was Todd Szykowski. Jess, I think there are some you will never change. You just have to grab one person at a time. That is great advice from Marco Asome. Mark Davidson said he will check it out tomorrow. I'm not sure what that was. Okay. Marcio TX Era said, I call that firefighters toxic active. Replying to Jess Rosinka, our buddy summed it up the best. Keep pushing, stay motivated, and don't listen to the mutts when they bark. Send it. And, of course, Brad Clark. So everyone can take that and carry it with them. And remember, there are plenty of rock stars out there. So it's catching you up. Here's the next question. It's from Hannah Elliott, and she said, Chief, you've brought up Simon Sinek. If you're familiar, what do you think about the performance versus trust scale he learned from the SEALs? It is about capitalizing the human element compared to being battle ready.
So, and I've read a lot about it, and I'm probably not going to, I don't know if I can't say as I've read 100% on that from him, and a lot of books blur together. So, but from what I remember and recall about it, the SEALs value, you need to be able to do your job, but it's more important that, and like even FDNY talks about it, like they talk about like the highest compliment you can ever be paid is the guy was always in position. So you don't necessarily need to be the most outstanding shooter or the most outstanding swimmer or whatever your skill set is. but you need to always do the job correctly. You need to always be in position and do it right. And that's more important. So, we talk about, just to kind of equate it to the fire service, I'd rather have a guy with heart that's a little less skilled than have a guy that's very skilled that doesn't give a crap.
Right on.
Because the guy with heart will always try his hardest, and that trust, you need to be able to trust people. And if you can't trust somebody's going to be where they're supposed to be and try their hardest, they may fail. And that's they have to at least hit a minimum standard, obviously. But so I think that's what the SEALs, at least in my understanding of it, when the SEALs are talking about is, you can have the most battle ready person in the world, but if nobody trusts them, then what's the point?
What's the point?
You look at, Band of Brothers, right? You look at when the NCOs all resigned.
Yes.
Over Sobel, right? Over Sobel. Sobel knew what it took. Well, I think he built the platoon out of hate, but
right.
But he knew what it took to build a soldier, to create a soldier. But unfortunately, he didn't have the skill set going forward to lead them into battle, and they all recognized that, and so that trust was missing.
Right.
Trust is, what's it? Easy to lose and hard to win back, and and all it's such an integral part of everything else. It's Ray Pfeiffer, God rest his soul. Good friend of mine, was on 40 Engine, New York City, died of 9/11 cancer. But Ray used to always say, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. That was kind of his mindset. And when he took on the Zagota bill and fought on Capitol Hill for those guys for the benefits, it was in his mind doing the right thing, and it wasn't because everybody was watching; it's because it was the right thing.
That's awesome.
Kind of segued there. Sorry.
No, it's a good segue, man. Between Brad Clark and now Ray Pfeiffer, we're going. Like we said, if this is the weekly scrap, it should be called Rabbit Holes. So
right.
But I'm good with it, man. This is quality, and I mean,
you're getting a glimpse inside my mind right now. You know how I wake up in the morning.
I take it, and we're sharing it. That's the best part, man. So, Matt Foster, I was just going to bring that point up. I think it's a great thing for reference. Awesome. Moving on. You talked on Grossman, readiness, training, service, doing our job, expect fire, expect victims. I mean, we've touched on a lot of this stuff. I want to ask you about the state of the pendulum, kind of. We touched on it in the quote that one of your posts, it was the over-safetification of the fire service. And do you think, because of work by you and others like you, aggressive fire, just the mindset, do you think the pendulum has started to swing backwards?
So I won't take zero credit for this. But I think that what we're seeing with where training has gone now and the message gone out there, and I'm going to preface this is not a UL slam, but sure. I'm going to speak negatively about the research, not the research itself, but the tactical piece that came out of it. And I think, to me, that was like the pinnacle. That was when the safety pendulum got pinned all the way to the, vertical ventilation was bad. VES was bad. Going inside the fires was bad, or was good as long as you sprayed water through the window first. And I know there's people out there going, "That's not what we said. That's not what we said." No, but there was a lot of information that was twisted and manipulated by people that, for whatever reason, I'm not. I don't think there was any malintent with any of this. I think that as a human form, our bottom line is that we go to what we're comfortable with. And to some people, that was their skill set. That's what they were more comfortable with. So it was easy to embrace it and grab onto it. But that was when the pendulum got, pegged all the way there. Sure. And then there was a lot of pushback. There were a lot of people, a lot of cry saying, hue cry saying this is wrong. Sure, outside water works. We all know that it works, but not in every case. And there's sometimes we're going inside's better. And then they did the victim study, and then they did the nozzle study, and then they did the they kept adding on to that. And I think that the pendulum has swung back around. I think that, there's a lot of guys, Ray McCormick, Kurt Isaacson, Aaron Fields, and I'm missing a million guys.
Right. I know it's always the trouble when you start listing.
Yes. I know, exactly. Yes. As soon as I start down the name, start down the rabbit hole, Bill Gustin, Rick George, all guys that grabbed onto and said, no, this is the right way to do this job. And it goes back to, the Bobby Howell quote of, we need to be effective, and then safe within that effectiveness.
Right.
To that point, if you go to every fire you go to, you take a risk avoidance posture. You become tentative, and if you're tentative, you're less safe than you would be if you weren't tentative, right? Because by default, tentative, you're concerned. You're scared isn't the word I'm looking for.
Timid.
But timid, yeah, exactly. So, but if you think all of a sudden that you're going to be in a hallway and with taking this risk averse profile and hear somebody screaming for help at the end of the hallway, and you're going to crawl under fire blown out of a room door to get to that person, because all of a sudden you're going to pull open your shirt and the Superman's going to come out.
Right.
It's not going to happen, because it takes the experience of having been there before and being in a hot hallway and knowing how much heat you can and can't take. That comes from experience, and that all comes from pushing the envelope a little bit, not to the extreme, but putting yourself in a risky situation to the point where you can accept that risk and you know what you can and can't do. You may not be able to push past that doorway, or you may be able to, but you're not going to know if you've never done it, and then all of a sudden you're put in the situation when you have to do it. To Grossman says, the time a police officer needs to decide when he pulls his gun and points at somebody that's going to kill them is not at 2:00 in the morning when he's pulled the gun out and pointed at the person. He needs to have had that thought process long before that,
right on,
to make sure that mentally he's prepared for what's going to happen and the consequences that come with it. And if he doesn't do that, he's going to end up being that police officer you read about, gets his gun taken away from him and gets shot.
Right on.
Now, I had lived that last part, but everything else was Grossman up until that point.
No, it's a great encapsulation of Grossman. So perfect summary. But
I told you I'd work it in. It was just a matter of where.
Just a matter of where and when.
Yeah.
No, it's one of my favorite quotes. Muhammad Ali talks about, I won this fight long before I danced under the lights.
Right.
I love that.
So Pele, right? So talk about mindset, right? Let's go back to mindset for a sec. But you realize that Pele played the entire game in his head before he ever went out there. So he'd get in the locker room an hour before the game. He would lay on the bench, close his eyes, and visualization is a big part of what Rick George teaches. But he would visualize himself running out, being introduced at the beginning, and he would visualize himself scoring the winning goal and putting his arms up in the air, and he would visualize the whole game from the first kick to the last goal, and he would always visualize it as a victory. And
nice.
And that he credits part of that is why he was so successful as a soccer player. So, to that point, it's Muhammad Ali, right? He fought the fight before he ever got in the ring.
Yeah. The visualization, the mindset. I mean, we've come back full circle.
Right.
That's beautiful. So I've got, I always like to ask my guests if they have books that they think firefighters should read. And
I gave you 6 of them.
Right. I think we've got a lot. So Thank Me for My Service with Matt Best, Leo Stapleton's fiction series.
Yeah.
The Hackworth, About Faith, Simon Sinek.
Yeah. Right. If I had to say one right there, Hackworth is it's a great read. It's a huge book, but there's more leadership lessons in that book than anything else I've ever read.
Okay. Well, no matter what, I'll list.
And it's written as a good story too. So it's a good story. So you get them by accident. You know what I mean?
And that's the hardcore Recondos and all that, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Yep.
I have not read it yet, so that'll be a good one. And every time I have, now this is 6 of them. Every time I do a scrap, I get more books added to my pile of books I have to read. So you did your part for sure with throwing 6 of them on there. Luckily, I got Start With Why and On Combat. I've got those down. So perfect. Now on the weekly scrap, we do five questions for firefighters. So the points are arbitrary, and it's completely up to you on your answers. It's strictly the world according to Dave LeBlanc. Are you ready, sir, for the 5 questions for firefighters?
Sure. And
Gary,
I didn't study.
I want to say Gary Lane actually knocked it out of the park. He was one of the best answers I've ever received. So that was a couple weeks ago.
Of course, Gary did.
So that guy's a character, man. I love him. Here we go. Question number 1. What is the number 1 issue facing the modern fire service?
Not enough fires.
Sorry.
Because you ever notice that morale's better when we go to fires?
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
Stuff gets done when we go. I mean, it's just it's what we and it's that's kind of a flippant answer. I've always said that, I don't want anybody's house to be damaged, but I want to be there, when it happens. And I think that's the mindset of most guys. So
100%.
That's the problem. We're not practicing our skills enough.
Not enough. They say in the football, winning fixes everything. When the team's dysfunctional, I'm like, fires fix everything.
Yep.
Obviously, like you said, you don't want someone's house to burn. Number 2.
Right.
What is the thing you are most excited about for the future of firefighting?
That's a good question. I think that I'm most excited to see some kind of practical application of the technology into firefighting. I think that when we get to the point where our mask is a heads-up display that instantly becomes a thermal imager that we can go through and we can work in a zero visibility environment with reliable vision.
Sure.
Those type of things. Better communications. All those things. I think we're getting there. I don't think we're there yet, and it may never happen. But because other than that, I think it's firefighting. It's a brute force and ignorance kind of thing. It doesn't require a lot of technology to do it, but if we can enhance it, enhance it with it, then that's probably what I'm most excited for.
What was the quote? Brute force and ignorance.
Brute force and ignorance, man.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, question number 3. Best rank or position to hold, and we already touched on it, in the fire service.
Yeah. So I say that facetiously. It depends on what you want to do. I feel like I had the most fun and able to impact the most as a captain. The way my department was set up,
Sure.
4 captains, 4 shifts. So you're in charge of the shift. You kind of had your own personality of your group. You had the administrative responsibility of 7 other people, and you had a lot of input into how the department was run, but you didn't have a lot of the bureaucratic nonsense that comes with being that next step up. So, I became deputy. Now I'm responsible for everybody, policies, procedures, budget, all those things. So the captain was definitely like the highest amount of responsibility with the least amount of responsibility, if you know what I mean.
The perfect, yeah.
That makes sense. So,
oh, absolutely.
but I gotta be honest with you. I mean, I've loved every rank that I've been in because every road is different. Every road is different. I mean, we're all in the same car, but it's a different view depending on where you sit. So, I've only been chief since July, but so far this road is awesome.
Awesome.
We're doing some good things and just keep pushing forward.
Good. And I think being plugged in has a huge difference on that, on every level.
Yeah, I definitely try and spend as much time as I can without going overboard, but with the troops. Coffee, once or twice a day. Just different shifts. Just see what's going on. Got at least just to keep a track of the nicknames and the jokes. You got to at least find out what's going on there.
No, question 4. Best advice you have ever received?
So the best advice I had ever received. So this is actually kind of funny, but we used to have a lieutenant, and when I grew up, this was in the first department I worked on, and he was kind of like the sour guy, everybody, but he had some wisdom. And now I look at it 30 years later, and I'm like, man, that guy was on point. So his 3 pieces, Sammy's 3 pieces of wisdom were: never pass a hydrant, stay off the radio, it can only get you in trouble. And the worst thing they can ever make us do is what we were supposed to be doing in the first place. And I think that's the one. That's the one that, and he kind of said it, kind of facetiously, but it's true, right? The worst thing that you can ever do in this job is what you're supposed to be doing in the first place. So if that's your default mindset, everything else is easy after that,
I like that one. The worst thing is what we're supposed to be doing.
I probably had better pieces of advice, but those have hung around with me.
Those ones have stuck with you?
Yeah.
And finally, the final question. Question number 5. You have heavy fire and tenable space. Would you rather be assigned to the nozzle or first in on VES?
I'd rather the nozzle. The novice job. And I love I love doing truck work. And that's why I love all parts. And my department's great because we don't have a dedicated, so I could go out the door in the engine, the truck, the ambulance. It didn't matter. So we always got to mix it up. And I've gone to fires in the engine and done truck work, and I've gone to fires on the truck and done engine work.
Sure. And I think that's the bulk of the American Fire Service, probably. But
I would agree that's so. But yeah, if I had the chance, I want to make the push.
Nice. All right, max points always, dude. I love the answers. Thank you for doing the 5 questions for firefighters. I love asking it and getting all the answers. What else you got going on coming up for you? I know it's been, 2020. How crazy can 1 year be? I don't want to even say it out loud because I don't want it to challenge it. But
so right now, the only thing that's coming up in my future is hopefully Indy next April. We got rolled forward, so